In 1989, Yavner moved into its current Elstonwick campus. The campus was smaller, far more rudimentary than what exists now. Here, take a look. For years, as the student body continued to grow, the campus needed to grow with it. In 1999, the Yavner Foundation was formed, made to ensure the school's physical development was not left to chance.
I graduated more than 20 years ago from Yavner College before the establishment of the Yavner Foundation. Today, when I walk through the gates with my 3 children, I'm amazed by the transformation that the college has had, both inside and outside of the classroom, with amazing facilities and first-class educational programming.
It's thanks to the Foundation members and its donors that Yavner looks the way it does today. What's the result of 20 years of the Yavner Foundation transformation? Here's a glimpse, starting in prep, where the junior primary wing was completely revamped.
It's wonderful to work in this beautiful, light and airy space where we've got opportunities for indoor activities and outdoor play, and for young children to just have the space and the freedom to learn in this really beautiful environment.
There is also the wonderful new creche and ELC centre at the Balaclava campus.
Over the last 4 years, our outdoor and indoor facilities have really grown in terms of what we have on offer. So thank you very much to our foundation and to our many generous donors for all their support over the last few years.
Here in secondary, it's thanks to the foundation that I'm able to make such an artistic mess. That spans across the arts. In addition to the art room, the drama room has been refurbished, and the new performance space now matches the exceptional quality of its music.
Before we've had this new performance space, it was so much harder to practice without interruptions, and really now it's been so awesome to have such an amazing space.
Outside, students now spend their breaks on the multi-purpose courts, recreation area, adventure playground, mini oval, soccer field, and we can't wait for the completion of the amphitheatre. And if you're not feeling active, students also have new sitting areas where we can catch up with friends beneath the trees. Staff benefit too. The foundation ensured their comfort with both a new primary and secondary staff room.
It is a wonderful feeling to be able to step into this new staff room. It is a space where we can have conversations and plan in a relaxing, wonderful atmosphere.
The work of the Yavner Foundation has helped to enhance student learning. Teachers are now even equipped with the latest in e-learning. And when the Yavner family comes to celebrate all of its achievements, they can now do so in Hamirka's, the Lamb Hall and Foundation Foyer.
Right here in the Lamb Hall, since prep, our parents, grandparents and special friends have seen us grow and shine. This is where we celebrate so many of our achievements.
We're so grateful to you, our generous donors, that support us in our mission of providing a rich Jewish education to every student.
Each of these developments, as well as many others, are thanks to the passionate and determined work of the Yavner Foundation members and donors. The school has literally been transformed because of their efforts, and the biggest beneficiaries are our students.
Good evening and welcome to the Yavner Foundation series. Our previous event was held on campus in February, where the happiest man on earth, the inspiring 100-year-old Eddie Jaku, wowed our members with his powerful, heartbreaking, and ultimately hopeful story of how happiness can be found even in the darkest of times. Who would have thought that 6 months later, we would be hosting our next event via Zoom? To find a positive in this situation, it has given us the opportunity to share this event with the wider community and introduce to you the Yavner Foundation, which was established in 1999 to support the college in the implementation of its long-term goals. With over 150 members, it is the body responsible for major fundraising for the college and encourages significant donations for capital projects and programs that benefit all Yavner students. Our foundation continues to build on the renowned community culture of philanthropy to secure the future of Leibler College as one of Melbourne's leading Jewish independent day schools. and ensures the opportunities afforded by a Yavner education can be enjoyed for generations to come. In Pirkei Avot, Ethics of the Fathers, it states, Aseh lecha rav, make for yourself a teacher. We are truly honoured to have within our school community a leader that is as talented, educated and approachable as Rabbi Mirvis. Dublin born and London raised, his impact since arriving to our shores from Israel 5 years ago has been enormous. The pasuk goes on to say, Ukneh lecha chaver, acquire for yourself a friend. We at the Yavner Foundation truly believe we are fortunate to have Mark Leibler as our close friend and appreciate his generosity of time, wise counsel and financial support.
It's particularly appropriate that this conversation between Rabbi Mirvis and Mark Leibler is at a Yavner event due to the long association of the Leibler family with Yavner College. We acknowledge tonight Michael Gowenda, the author of Power Broker, who I understand is on this link, for giving us a unique insight into the key events in the community's history. In Chapter 6, Yavner's expansion from being just a primary school to both primary and secondary education is discussed. Community views at the time were mixed. Some believed that this should not occur. However, in Mark's view, and I quote from the book, Yavner College gave its students a school which others could not, a particularly Jewish identity that was Zionist and modern Orthodox. That identity might be considered narrow in scope, but it was deeply held and promised to produce Jews secure in their Jewishness, knowledgeable about and able to practice Judaism with an unshakable commitment to Israel. 41 years on, from the first secondary class, Leibler Yavner College continues to fulfill this purpose. This was only possible due to the leadership of many in the Mizrahi community, including Rosanna and Mark Leibler. In that vein, it gives me much pleasure to, on behalf of the Yavner Foundation, to present Rabbi Danny Mirvis in conversation with Mark Leibler.
Well, thank you very much, Benji and Ruben, and good evening to you, everybody, and good evening to you, Mark. How are you keeping?
As well as can be expected. It's not very pleasant, but, you know, we're not in a concentration camp. So, and we will come out of this, hopefully sooner rather than later.
Well, Bezrat Hashem, and
yeah.
It's good to hear that you are doing well. Is Rosanna doing well? The family, you're all going okay?
Yeah, everyone's managing okay. No one's got corona, and but it'll be nice when we can get to see people again and see our family too.
Bezrat Hashem. And, you know, this is a conversation, Mark, that you and I were scheduled to have anyway. When I received a copy of the book very kindly delivered on my doorstep, I called you to say thank you. And you told me that when I finish reading the book, I have to phone you up and tell you what I thought about the book.
Correct.
So here I am. I'm here to report on my homework. And thanks to the Yavner Foundation, other people are able to listen into our conversation as well. And I can tell you that I thought it really was a really excellent book. I really, really enjoyed reading the book. The author, Michael Gowenda, just did such a beautiful job introducing the reader to different worlds, the different worlds in which you operate. There's the world of Judaism, the world of Zionism, the world of rebuilding a Jewish community after the Shoah. There's the world of tax law and politics and Indigenous Australians, and brings the reader through a narrative through each of these worlds, describing your impact on each of these worlds and how they have impacted you in return. And what makes it really interesting is that this is an unauthorized biography. So when reading the book, I'm thinking to myself, oh, I wonder what Mark's thinking now, and oh, I hope that doesn't make Mark angry, and who knows what Mark thinks about this chapter. And just very briefly to get us going, what are your thoughts about this book?
Look, first of all, I entered into this enterprise with a great deal of trepidation. Michael Gowenda wouldn't have been prepared to write an authorised biography, even if I wanted him to. And I was concerned because you never know for sure how things like this are going to turn out, and where you have no control whatsoever. But, you know, frankly, I think he did a great job, at least based on the feedback that I've received from a multitude of people, most of whom have sort of described it as a page turner, interesting. Even people who know me well said that they learnt quite a few things that they didn't know beforehand. So, and even I didn't fully appreciate all the way that whatever I've been involved in is interrelated. He did a very good job in demonstrating that in the book. And well, the most important reason why I agreed to cooperate was because I wanted to leave something behind for my children, and more importantly, my great-grandchildren, who I might never know, and my great-great-great-grandchildren. You know, I think back sometimes and imagine how wonderful it would have been had I been able to access a book like that about my great-grandparents, even my grandparents. So there's something to be said for modern technology. There we are. No, overall, I'm quite pleased with the result, even though, you know, I don't necessarily agree with everything that's in the book.
Well, I don't think you're the only one who disagrees with some things that are written in the book, and maybe we'll come to that soon. You know, something that struck me when reading through the book is, if I think about the British Jewish community and the leading prominent Jews of influence in that community, then you can say that every prime minister has at least one Jew who has a certain level of access or influence with that prime minister. But as that prime minister leaves Downing Street, so does that Jewish leader's influence. And as a new prime minister arrives, somebody else has the connection with that individual and has a different level of access. When reading through your book, it appears that you managed time after time with successive prime ministers to maintain a level of access and even friendship and influence. How did you manage to do that?
I think because I was very careful to not get involved in partisan politics. I've never been a member of a political party. And when I've looked at people, leading politicians, I always look at the person and what the person stands for. And, you know, there are some prime ministers that I've had a great deal of regard for. Others, mind you, I've had a relationship with every single prime minister since Malcolm, and including Malcolm Fraser. So I've known them all. I dealt with Tony Abbott also quite frequently, although it's not really mentioned in the book there, but the same with Bob Hawke, although my brother Izzy had a much closer relationship than I did with Bob Hawke. But I think the three prime ministers that Michael Gwenda is focused on, you know, there's an element of bipartisanship when it comes to issues of concern to the Jewish community, when it comes to Israel. And I think they were prepared to listen to what I had to say. And then, of course, there's the whole issue of tax and tax policy. And again, if you look at Indigenous affairs, there's a huge amount of bipartisanship involved there. So that's why, because the issues that I was involved in were pretty much, as a matter of policy, supported by both of the main political parties, they were happy to talk.
Now, there's one former prime minister who I don't think is going to be sending you a Rosh Hashanah card this year, and that is Kevin Rudd. And those who are joining us this evening, I'm sure most of whom would have seen the op-ed which he wrote in the Australian Jewish News, defending his record, and he uses the word fictional to describe certain things which are reported in your unauthorized biography. By now, both you and the author have had an opportunity to respond, and I noticed that you also have used the word fictional to describe his report of events. So let me ask you, what would possess a former prime minister to make something like this up? And it looks rather petty from the outside that he's then gone to the Jewish News to defend it. Why would he make up something, you know, that you leant over and you said something, whatever he claims that you said?
Look, Rabbi, just picture this. A total of 12 people, including the Prime Minister, the Foreign Minister, and his Chief of Staff, sitting in the Prime Minister's residence at the Lodge in Canberra, specially arranged for kosher food to be delivered for dinner. I think I was the only one that had an interest in eating the kosher food, but special arrangements for kosher food. No time for anyone to eat the dinner, just by the way, because he made it very clear that he had very limited time available and we had to rush through the evening. But I wasn't sitting next to the Prime Minister, I was sitting opposite the Prime Minister. It would have been totally impossible for me to lean over and to menace him in any way, shape or form without people noticing or seeing it. And all of the guests there were absolutely unanimous that no such thing occurred. Moreover, 3 days after the dinner, I haven't made this public yet, but 3 days after the dinner, I get a telephone call from Philip Green, who is Kevin Rudd's senior advisor at the time. And he says to me, look, I know you're going to Israel and we want to re-establish good relations. We want you to persuade Bushy Herzog, who was the leader of the Labor Party, the opposition at the time, please to come to Australia. We'll give him a welcome. We're going to invite him officially, but when you're there, you'll be seeing him. We really want you to emphasise, that the PM wants him to come. Now, if I'd been menacing him 3 days earlier, is that the sort of call I'd be getting? The reality is that, unfortunately, this was, I don't quite understand what happened, but somehow or other, the support for Julia Gillard, her support for Israel, all somehow or other, and her relationship with the Jewish community, somehow or other, came together in his mind in a total irrational way to develop some sense of conspiracy that we'd been involved in it. And of course, it was total, unadulterated nonsense. By the way, what didn't appear in his op-ed, there was one particular sentence in his book, in Kevin Rudd's The PM Years, which was extremely distressing, to put it mildly. What he said was, and for Leibler to attack the democratically elected Prime Minister of his country as he sought to argue the interests of another country was beyond the pale. Here's the good old anti-Semitic trope of dual loyalties. And by the way, I'm not suggesting Kevin Rudd was anti-Semitic, he wasn't. But you can see the way his mind was working. So I think there's an element of instability there. That's the only way I can explain it.
And you've mentioned conspiracy theories. There are some members of the Jewish community who, when your book has come out, they've seen it serialized in the newspapers and they feel a little bit uncomfortable because while they might be really proud of your personal achievements and your professional achievements and your political achievements, if they were appearing in Mizrahi Matters or Kesher of Leibler Yavner College or in an evening in the Goldberger Hall, that would be one thing. But they were a little uncomfortable with a book coming out about Jews, power, money, influence, prime ministers. To have something like this in the public domain has made some people feel a little uncomfortable. How would you respond to people who feel that way?
Well, I had concerns along those lines and discussed them with Michael Gowenda when we were talking about, doing the book all together and with me cooperating. It would have been very difficult to write a book like this without my cooperation. But I ultimately came to the conclusion there may be an influence, but not untoward influence. The only influence that was brought to bear is what you'd expect quite properly to be brought to bear in a democratic system. And we're not the only ethnic community around the place. There are various other communities, there are various other groupings, and they all have relationships. with prime ministers and with governments. Some do it very well. Some are pretty hopeless. But this is part and parcel of lobbying. A government is part and parcel of the democratic process. That's how it works. So on reflection, I decide, actually, we gain much more, I think, by being upfront about these things and demonstrating the propriety associated with how we manage these things, rather than leaving it for people to speculate untoward behaviour, conspiracy theories, so on and so forth. So on reflection, I decided that I didn't think this was a problem. And by the way, if you look at the reaction to the book so far, who knows what's going to happen in the coming weeks. But so far, that fear hasn't been realised.
Well, there's clearly been a positive reaction. I ordered a copy of the book to be delivered to somebody, and I received a response from Monash Press saying that there were just too many orders and they couldn't handle the order. So clearly it's going well so far.
Yeah, I believe Michael Gowenda told me they're doing another print run. So, yeah,
already.
I guess so.
But with the same information, it's not yet the second volume.
Yeah, I'm not sure that I could go through that again. It was quite stressful, you know, hour after hour.
Yeah.
Sorry.
If I ask you on that point, Michael Gowenda, as the author, chose what would be in this book and what's out the book.
Correct.
And he strung together certain narratives, whether it was sibling rivalry or rivalry between peak Jewish bodies or the post-Shoah narrative, and he very beautifully scripted the events and fit them in along those narratives. But there were lots of things which weren't in the book. If we were to have a volume 2, are there particular highlights of your career so far which you feel perhaps could have been mentioned in the book and were not?
Well, yeah, some of them sort of come to mind because I actually raised some of them with him, but he sort of convinced me that this has to be a book which has got the main themes in there. You can't put everything in a book because otherwise it becomes a book of 2,000 pages and no one's going to read the thing. And I think he's managed pretty well that way. But if you want to ask me for examples of things that could have been included that weren't, well, you know, in the latter part of 1994, this was straight after Oslo. I'd spoken to the foreign minister over here, who was, I think, Gareth Evans at the time. And I said, look, I'd like to meet this Arafat guy. And he said to me, all right, well, I'll see what I can do. And there we go. I'm zooming in with the Australian ambassador into Gaza with sirens blaring, accompanied by a guard who told me was from Iraq and insisted, at least in the car, that I take my kippah off, but I insisted on putting it back on when I went to see Arafat in his headquarters, because the only way I agreed to do this was on a basis that I was a Zionist leader, not just a Jewish leader, but a Zionist leader. And by the way, of course, before I went in, I got the blessings from Rabin's office and also Ehud Olmert from the Likud. He was very much a Likudnik in those days. That was before his conversion. So, I mean, and it was an incredible experience because, first of all, he loves having his picture taken just outside there with his arm around his visitors. So I had to manoeuvre so that that would not happen. The other thing I need to be very careful of, because in my nervousness, it's very easy to smile. I didn't want to be smiling with him either when the photographers were there. Anyway, we managed to overcome that. We went inside, we sat down, and guess what? The first thing that happens in my nervousness, I push the glass of water over, spills all over the table. Arafat jumps up, he grabs the tea towel and starts cleaning up after me. So the whole thing was quite surrealistic. I had almost an hour with him, and the real problem is he didn't answer any of my questions or respond to things that I put to him. It was, you know, like the king sitting there. But he had a number of his, what do you call the ministers or something there, who I had an interesting conversation with. But you know, this was quite an experience for, you know, a little Australian Jew at the time, but it was fascinating. The other thing, for example, that probably people don't know or people have forgotten about, in 88, Shamir was the Prime Minister, it was a government of national unity. Perez was the Foreign Minister and Vice Premier. So I had asked, it was Bill Hayden, who was the Foreign Minister at the time, I'd asked him, I wanted to meet Mubarak. So he said he'll set it up. So I got on the plane, don't remember whether it was El Al or Egyptian Air, I'm pretty sure it was El Al. But anyway, got on the plane, went over to Cairo, was met there by their protocol people, taken to the Nile Hilton where I stayed overnight, had an appointment to meet the Foreign Minister Abdel Magid there the next day. And we had this surrealistic chat. He'd sent back his very good wishes to the Foreign Minister, Bill Hayden, and then someone came in and interrupted them. Interrupted our meeting halfway through and he sent them away. It turns out that it was a Jordanian ambassador there to say goodbye. He was leaving the country, so he had to wait for the Zionist leader. I mean, there were a lot of things like that which were quite fascinating. When Barack Obama came here, Julia Gillard was the Prime Minister. She invited me to the state dinner in Parliament House. So I'm sitting there with actually pretty good table, two from their table. And I said, I'm going to go and say hello. So one of the ministers sitting with me, if you do that, they'll shoot you. So I said, okay, good. So I got up and as I saw Julia Gillard standing up, so I said, introduce me to your friend. I mean, Obama. So she's about to do it. And guess what? Kevin Rudd, who was the Foreign Minister, walks in at that point and starts embracing Barack Obama, and she's standing there, oh, we'll have to wait until this is over. Anyway, I had an interesting little chat with him. Again, you're asking me things. I
think we do have enough for a second book. You've convinced me.
Yeah, these are the sort of things. But, you know, they didn't add to the main themes in the book, so I could understand him not putting it in there.
You mentioned Bill Hayden there, the foreign minister of the ALP. In the book, your relationship with him is described as almost an unlikely friendship, almost the surprising turn that you managed to develop a friendship with him. And it was put in the context of what was one of your greatest achievements, if not the greatest achievement, which was your role in ensuring comparing Zionism to racism, where you played such an important role there in Australia's leading international role in defeating ultimately that resolution. When we look at the Jewish world today, though, I fear that there are many people, not on the outside, but on the inside within the Jewish community, who won't really identify with the difference between Zionism and racism and will struggle to explain what's the difference between Zionism and racism. For a number of young Jews today, Zionism has become a dirty word, and it's almost an internal battle we need to fight now to ensure that people know about the positive values of Zionism. How can we, on an internal level, now win that struggle?
Well, I think, first of all, I mean, you're right. There are increasing numbers of young people who are being influenced by some of this extreme left-wing nonsense. And they haven't been around during the Shoah, they haven't been around during the establishment of the State of Israel, and these things are foreign to them. And of course, we live during times when social media is so influential as well too. And anyone, you know, with a Twitter account, sitting on Twitter all day, or on Facebook, or on LinkedIn, or these various other sort of social media outlets, can make a big noise and can influence people. So it's not easy, but I think in part, it's a question of improving the way we get information and educate our young people. I think this is absolutely critical. And the other thing is, I believe that what happened a couple of days ago with the United Arab Emirates is going to be totally transformational. I mean, it's taken decades to break this stranglehold that the Palestinians have had over Israel, in that no Arab country over and above, Egypt and Jordan, is going to establish relations, diplomatic relations with Israel until they solve the Palestinian problem. And that's not going to happen for a long time. And I think this has demonstrated that that's not the case. And I think, by the way, Bibi Netanyahu was right when he said this will bring us closer to peace with the Palestinians. Because once the Palestinians understand what's happening with the other Arab countries, they'll understand that it becomes in their interest to establish peace with Israel. It's not something which the Arab countries or anyone else is going to force on Israel. It means genuine negotiations. But it's not an easy problem to solve with the young people.
Sure, and talking about the Emirates, what I just love about that announcement is the clear consensus of celebration that there is on the Israeli side about this. We want peace. This is what we deeply yearn for, and when we achieve it, this is what we celebrate. It's something which clearly is something which all sides are talking about. I read Haaretz and I read a right-wing newspaper as well, and I'm hoping that somewhere between them I'm coming out balanced. And there's a real consensus here that this is a positive development for Israel and a positive development for the Middle East. And
but it's not only in Israel. When you see right and left saying these things, look at the United States, look at Biden and look at Trump. Here's something which is of great benefit to Israel that they can both agree upon. Look, annexation, let me tell you a secret. I know Bibi well enough. I've known him since 1986. Annexation was never going to happen, in my opinion. Was never going to happen from day one. That's my view. Because what for? All we do is create harm for ourselves, for Israel. For what benefit? It's not as if this has got anything to do with security. We declare that Israeli law applies there. Big deal. And to bring all of this harm potentially upon ourselves, and this opprobrium, and the Europeans go nuts. But what for? What do we gain?
Are there any occasions where you feel that it would be suitable for diaspora leaders to criticize Israel?
Oh, well, if it doesn't come, where you're not talking about security, yes. I mean, the settlements regulation law, the Bibi's trying to do a deal with Otzma in one of the previous elections, the treatment of the African asylum seekers. I'm on record as criticising in relation to all those things. But look, the issue with Israel's future and the Palestinians, it's not annexation. I've always had the vision. My Zionist vision is a vision of Israel as a Jewish state and a democratic state. It's got to be both. And you can't have a democracy unless you give all of those who are in the state the right to vote, which means that one day we've got to at least leave the possibility open for a Palestinian state to emerge from this, even though it mightn't happen for 1,000 years' time. We don't want to foreclose it. And that's what we're doing at the moment. We're not foreclosing the possibility. But more important than a Palestinian state and more important than democracy is survival. So we can't get involved in giving away land for a state if that's going to. And so hopefully one day, the day will come, we're able to. Look, this is Bibi at the Bar Ilan conference in 2009. That's what he said. And by the way, I believe that's what he means.
Mm-hmm. Now, if I could bring things a bit closer to home now, which is also towards the end of your biography, there's a part of your life which I didn't know much about, which was your involvement in Indigenous affairs, which is an amazing world of involvement and achievement. Now, since the book has been published, there have been certain developments which I'd like to ask you about, because a couple of weeks ago, Prime Minister Morrison unveiled new plans. They've been called ambitious new plans for improving Indigenous lives. However, these plans have not been welcomed by all Indigenous leaders. What are your thoughts of these plans?
Yeah, including by my friend Noel Pearson as well. Look, anything which gives Indigenous people more say in relation to their own affairs is a positive. One of the problems here is that a number of these peak organisations are in fact service providers, which means they're not in an equal bargaining position when it comes to dealing with the government, when the government is supplying them with the money for the services. And I think what Noel Pearson and Megan Davis and others are saying is that you can't allow this to supersede the Uluru Statement from the Heart, which talks about a genuine Indigenous representative body that needs to take on responsibility for giving advice in relation to these matters. And that the other thing you need to understand is it would be nice if there was such a thing as our first people. There is no such thing as our first people. We have many first peoples, many hundreds of first peoples, and they don't always agree. They very, very rarely agree on anything. And that was the beauty of the Uluru Statement of the Heart, because fundamentally this was the first time that there'd been such an extensive process and they actually reached agreement. And I think in my own heart of hearts, look, I've had the opportunity to spend a bit of time with this Prime Minister on an off-the-record basis talking about these issues. And I'm quietly hopeful that when the time is right, we're going to see the Uluru Statement from the Heart. We're going to see a voice in our Constitution. But it'll take time. It's not going to happen overnight. After all, our first peoples have been here for 65,000 years, another year or two, and I think we'll get there.
Fascinating. The first time I ever heard Noel Pearson speak was at your book launch. And he speaks like a Rosh Yeshiva. He speaks with a certain presence and an expectation that the crowd is going to hang on to every word and that there's going to be a wealth of knowledge and a depth in what he says where you need to go on the journey with him as he speaks in order to hear his message. And his message, I feel, was actually a deeply religious message. I mean, on a religious level, you know what the greatest religious moment in your book is? It's the miracle on page 51. Do you know what I'm talking about?
No.
I'll read it to you. It's a clear miracle where it says, it's talking about the year when you were in America in Yale. And it says, they had no money. Mark, who loved whiskey, could afford to buy only one bottle, which had to last him for the year.
Oh, Hanukkah, yeah.
It's a modern day Hanukkah miracle. One bottle lost. You remember? How did you do it?
Oh, I don't know. It's probably a slight exaggeration, but I got quite distressed because I had a much younger cousin there who was at Yale College, actually, from the United States. They used to come and sort of guzzle the whiskey on Friday nights, and
even bigger.
It came very close to running out. But I did get a second bottle. That's
really?
Yeah, I did.
That's a disappointment.
It wasn't that bad.
It's still very impressive. One was the shamash, and the other was your main bottle. That's how we'll justify it. But getting back to Noel Pearson, his message I felt was a very religious message, because he drew parallels between the Jewish experience and the Indigenous experience. And the parallel wasn't just that we have a joint history of suffering But in terms of our contemporary challenges, we face similar challenges. And he spoke about how we need, on the one hand, to keep the fire burning in the communal heart, at the same time as being good citizens of the nation. And of all the things that he's learned from you, he says the most important lesson that he learned from you was, and I'm quoting, "On the one hand, we are members of the tribe, and on the other, we are citizens of the world. We are not one or the other." And when I think about Leibler Yavner College and our mission for our students, this is really what we want to achieve. We want every single one of our students to be immersed in their tribe, immersed in Torah and Torah values, but at the same time, to be engaged with the world and make such an impressive contribution to the world around them, like the one which you have made. So what advice would you have for our students of our college who want to remain true to their Torah values, be members of the tribe, but also be good citizens to our country? How can they succeed in both worlds?
It's always it's a question of getting the balance right. But one of the points that he makes in his book, Michael Gawenda, is that the Mizrahi organisation has provided a disproportionate number of leaders to the Australian Jewish community. They come from, religious Zionist backgrounds. So what that tells you is that we're already pretty good at doing that sort of thing. And but you're 100% right. That is the basis of Yavner College, and that's why, I'm a very strong supporter of the school. This is our ethos. This is what we try to do. And by the way, it's not easy. It's a delicate balancing act. As if you listen to Noel Pearson, one of the things he's anxious to do, and he says he can learn this from us, the Jewish people, and that is integration, not assimilation. It's two very different sort of things. So, and that's a message, by the way, he's been promoting for 20, 30 years. But he's one of the most remarkable human beings I've ever met. He has an incredible intellect. He could have been a minister, maybe even Prime Minister now, had he taken up an offer by Paul Keating at the time to take a seat in the Parliament, but he has dedicated himself to his people, and he's been a very, very important force for good. One of his main messages has to be, don't kill us with welfare. We need self-determination. We need to be in charge of our own future. We need to be in charge of our own welfare. And he's done some good. He's, associated with educational institutions up in his community over there, which have been quite sort of successful in making inroads. But it's not easy. I mean, look, the reality is, here in Australia, we started off by murdering our Indigenous people, and then we sort of killed them with kindness. And the important things that should happen is that white bureaucrats should tell Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders what's good for them, what to do, and how to do it. We're finally coming, and by the way, the great bulk of the money was used to pay white bureaucrats and never got to the Aboriginals that it was meant for. I think a change is taking place, and change for the better. It's not going to happen overnight, and what's really critical is to nurture the young generation. I mean, one thing when I look at Indigenous people and I look at the terrible conditions that some of them live under, the one conclusion that I have come to is that the source, the means of fixing all of this up comes down to education. If you get the education right, you'll get the health right. If you get the education right, you'll get the employment right. You'll get everything else will fall into place. But that's the critical thing.
And if we just continue that theme for my concluding question, an eye to the future, as the book also concludes with an eye to the future. One of the narratives of the book is the way the leadership of the Australian Jewish community was largely dominated many years. What is there for the future? How confident are you for the future leadership of Australian Jewry?
You know, one of the things that I've said in the book, which I think is quoted in the book, is, you know, if you want to have a vibrant, viable organisation and you want to attract the young people, the critical thing is to have a leader. If you get the right leader running the organisation, then you're going to be successful. You're going to attract the right people, and you're going to get people interested in. So you don't need thousands of people. You need 2 or 3 of the right people to be willing to take the helms, and they'll be different people than, you know, the sort of leader that I was or my brother was. They will be different people, and they'll lead in different ways. But I'm quite confident that these people will arise, are already arising, and will be very well equipped to lead our community into the future.
All right, well, thank you so much for taking the time to discuss what I really think is a really, really fantastic book. You are far too young to be talking in the past tense about yourself or your career or leaving something for your great-grandchildren. Be'ezrat Hashem, there's much more to come in terms of your leadership for our school, for our community, for our organization, and for all Australians. And I wish you well, and I look forward to seeing you soon, and look forward to seeing everybody who's here this evening soon as well, in person. Be'ezrat Hashem, very soon. Be'ezrat
Thank
Hashem.
you, Rabbi.
And I will now hand over to Tanya Shaltiel, the Executive Director of the Yavner Foundation.
Thank you so much. This conversation has given us all an insight into the book, The Power Broker, and we have loved the stories that were shared with us. Mark, as you said, in order to have a vibrant organisation, you need to have the right leader. This evening we have had a unique opportunity to hear from you, together with Rabbi Mirvis, 2 exceptional leaders in our community. You are both intrinsically bound in ensuring that the future of Leibler Yavner College continues to honour the commitment of educating our students in fostering a love for Torah, excelling in Jewish and general studies, and ensuring that they become future leaders. We strive to get the balance right. On behalf of the Yavner Foundation, we thank our principal, Sherilyn Skews, our college co-chairs, Gerard Max and Ari Shachner, together with the college board, for their leadership, support, guidance in ensuring that our students thrive every day. May I take this opportunity to wish you all a Shana Tova or Metuka. May this new year bring health, peace, prosperity to you all and your families. Please stay safe. Thank you for joining us.
In 1989, Yavner moved into its current Elstonwick campus. The campus was smaller, far more rudimentary than what exists now. Here, take a look. For years, as the student body continued to grow, the campus needed to grow with it. In 1999, the Yavner Foundation was formed, made to ensure the school's physical development was not left to chance.
I graduated more than 20 years ago from Yavner College before the establishment of the Yavner Foundation. Today, when I walk through the gates with my 3 children, I'm amazed by the transformation that the college has had, both inside and outside of the classroom, with amazing facilities and first-class educational programming.
It's thanks to the foundation members and its donors that Yavner looks the way it does today. What's the result of 20 years of the Yavner Foundation transformation? Here's a glimpse, starting in prep, where the junior primary wing was completely revamped.
It's wonderful to work in this beautiful, light and airy space where we've got opportunities for indoor activities and outdoor play, and for young children to just have the space and the freedom to learn in this really beautiful environment.
There is also the wonderful new creche and ELC centre at the Balaclava campus.
Over the last 4 years, our outdoor and indoor facilities have really grown in terms of what we have on offer. So thank you very much to our foundation and to our many generous donors for all their support over the last few years.
Here in secondary, it's thanks to the foundation that I'm able to make such an artistic mess. That spans across the arts. In addition to the art room, the drama room has been refurbished, and the new performance space now matches the exceptional quality of its music.
Before we've had this new performance space, it was so much harder to practice without interruptions, and really now it's been so awesome to have such an amazing space.
Outside, students now spend their breaks on the multi-purpose courts, recreation area, adventure playground, mini oval, soccer field, and we can't wait for the completion of the amphitheatre. And if you're not feeling active, students also have new sitting areas where we can catch up with friends beneath the trees. Staff benefit too. The foundation ensured their comfort with both a new primary and secondary staff room.
It is a wonderful feeling to be able to step into this new staff room. It is a space where we can have conversations and plan in a relaxing, wonderful atmosphere.
The work of the Yavner Foundation has helped to enhance student learning. Teachers are now even equipped with the latest in e-learning. And when the Yavner family comes to celebrate all of its achievements, they can now do so in Hamirka's, the Lamb Hall and Foundation Foyer.
Right here in the Lamb Hall, since prep, our parents, grandparents, and special friends have seen us grow and shine. This is where we celebrate so many of our achievements.
We're so grateful to you, our generous donors, that support us in our mission of providing a rich Jewish education to every student.
Each of these developments, as well as many others, are thanks to the passionate and determined work of the Yavner Foundation members and donors. The school has literally been transformed because of their efforts, and the biggest beneficiaries are our students.